Going with planning and development, I am ready, I think, to start this. I think if they're able to hear us, then I think we're good to go. So
Speak loudly, enunciate.
Sure. So I'm joined by Michael Burton with Department of Planning and Development as well.
Michael?
Michael and I are both members of what we call the SSPA team, or the Site-Specific Plan Amendment team. And so we have a brief presentation where we're going to go over what SSPA is, how you can get involved in SSPA from the very beginning, and then we have a bit more detailed information about the actual nominating process for SSPA. So I think based on what Jeff is indicating, it sounds as though there's a lot of experience in this room, so I'm not going to spend too much time on kind of this background information. But our realm, Michael and my realm, is working on the comprehensive plan and amendments to the comprehensive plan. Those of y'all that are familiar with it, this will be just kind of an overview, but in general, the comprehensive plan guides future development decisions in Fairfax County, looks at the physical development and natural environment, and seeks to try to achieve a balance between growth and the preservation of our resources here in the county. It's used by the Planning Commission and the board to make decisions about land use changes in particular, and it's dynamic. It's not a static document. We update it a lot, and one of the ways that we can update it is through SSPA, which is dealing with land use changes for specific sites. So we have we call SSPA, Site-Specific Plan Amendment. Change page. Thank you, Jeff. So when I advance, feel free to just advance on your own slides as well. It's the exact same presentation, so it should work all along that way. SSPA, or Site-Specific Plan Amendment process, for those of you that have been a part of the county's planning process for a while, it's very similar to APR in a lot of ways, and then Fairfax Forward, which is another kind of incarnation, so to speak, of this general approach of looking at land use recommendations for site-specific areas. So we conducted a South County cycle in 2019, and before that, a North County cycle. Sully District was included in the North County cycle that started in 2017. There was an amendment that dealt with this area right across the street. It didn't end up going far in terms of having an actual plan amendment on the work program, but it was something that was screened as a part of the SSPA process back in 2017, 2018. So in any case, SSPA is kind of the current incarnation of APR. It's been in place since 2017, and it has a three-part structure, which is shown on this screen, where in the nomination phase, anybody can put in a proposal to change the comprehensive plan for a specific site or a collection of parcels. The nominations that are accepted into the process, they're eligible for SSPA, then proceed to what we call a screening phase. So this is kind of one of the things that is different from the APR cycles of old, was the screening phase where you have this high-level policy review looking at whether or not a nomination as presented should advance for further review with the community or not. And so screening is a big part of SSPA. Next phase, once something has been added to what we call the Comprehensive Plan Amendment Work Program, that's kind of the list of all the planning studies that we have going on at any given point in time in the county. Then you proceed to what we call the evaluation phase. So that's kind of our formal planning exercise where we review impacts with the community, and then we engage the community in doing the visioning work that's needed for those planning sites. So one thing about SSPA is that it's been, as I mentioned, it's been around for about 5 years. And for the past year, we conducted a retrospective assessment of how it had worked now that we've gone through a full North County, South County cycle where we're focusing on the northern districts and then the southern districts supervisor-wise throughout the county. We made some process improvements, which I'm going to show you a couple of the changes to SSPA, which are just about to launch as a part of our new countywide cycle starting up in about 2 weeks. Just kind of breaking down some of the changes that are a part of SSPA right here. One is that we've shortened the overall timeline of review for SSPA, including in the nomination window. So previously we'd had a 3-month cycle. We've whittled that down to a 1-month nomination window, during which anybody in the community can put in a land use change for consideration. So our nomination window is going to be opening up very soon. So from October the 3rd through the 28th, this is when anybody can fill out our form. It's free. Anybody can participate in the nominating process. Put in an idea for a specific land use change to the comprehensive plan. We have, as the name kind of tells you, countywide eligibility this cycle. So instead of doing this North County, South County oscillation, which we did do during APR as well as SSPA, this year we're going to be doing a countywide eligibility period. So eliminated that north-south kind of oscillation in favor of countywide eligibility. Submission requirements, there are a couple of additional submission requirements compared to the prior cycles of SSPA. So that includes a property owner's signature, as well as an illustrative concept plan. So one of the things that you'll note is previous cycles of SSPA have just required a statement of justification, kind of a written summary of what the proposal is. What we found is both staff as well as the community really kind of needed that additional information to visually depict how development on a site could be arranged. And so that new illustrative concept plan, although it had been submitted with some SSPAs in the past and some APRs in the past, is a requirement for this current cycle. We're asking for additional information to help the screening phase discussion help us determine priorities, such as a development timeline, if there is one. Not all nominations are paired with a development application, but some are. And so what we wanted to do is, with the screening phase discussion and with the nominations as they're coming in, understand which of these are kind of on a timeline where we really do need to take a look at it. There's a high priority so that we can balance that against the other things that are on our work program. Screening phase, here are a couple of milestones in terms of what our screening phase will entail. So once nominations are submitted as a part of the nomination period in October, we'll be looking at a December 6th board action item. And that's when the board members will have the ability to accept or reject nominations on an individual basis to determine which ones should proceed for further review in our formal screening process. So those that are added as a part of SSPA by the board at that December 6th meeting will proceed. We'll start to work with the district supervisors on setting up community meetings. And so that's when the community will have kind of that early opportunity to weigh in on the nominations, provide input to staff and to stakeholders, including the nominators, on their priorities as well as their comments that they may have on the nominations. And so those January meetings will be scheduled following the December 6th board action item once we have that list of the nominations that are going to proceed into screening. A couple of changes that we're considering for the Planning Commission. Right now, or what we've done in prior cycles is had a Planning Commission hearing on every single nomination. And what we found is that while that's fine and we get plenty of public input that way, one thing that's missing from that is having the ability to really look at the nominations as an aggregated batch. I think one thing that happens with SSPA is that we have this very regular cycle, and looking at all these nominations as they come in really gives us an opportunity to look at all the priorities that we have across the county in terms of not just SSPAs, but other types of planning studies. So area planning studies, Reston's a good example. We're doing a Reston study that's looking at a whole host of issues that the supervisor wanted us to look at as a part of that comprehensive planning study. That's not a part of SSPA. It's a different type of planning study that's looking at a greater aggregation of land area. We also have countywide policies that we want to amend and that are getting amended. One, for example, that's going on right now is looking at our public facilities public facilities element of the comprehensive plan. There's another one dealing with affordable housing preservation. So there's different things on our comprehensive plan amendment work program. And SSPA gives us that opportunity to really look at everything as a batch because we have this relatively large number of proposals all coming in at the same time. So we can reset our priorities and make sure that there's a good program for dealing with all levels of aggregation for comprehensive planning. So the Planning Commission will hold a workshop. It'll be open to the public. People can participate. They can comment. They can be a part of that discussion. And then in February and March, the board will take action on a revised comprehensive plan amendment work program, which will include some of the nominations that are recommended by the Planning Commission, recommended by staff, those that are ready to proceed into the evaluation phase. So this will be the screening phase. It's reduced from about 6 to 7 months down to about 4 months. So it's a shorter overall process there. Hopefully a more expeditious review for all involved, and helps us to really kind of understand what our priorities are, not just amongst the SSPAs, but also, as I mentioned, across different priorities that we have at county. All that is leading up to the formal. Oh, sorry, got to advance the slide. Yeah, advance the slide to the evaluation stage. So that's leading up to our third and final stage of the formal comprehensive planning process. And this is what we call the evaluation stage. So something will be the planning study that came in as a nomination will be added to our comprehensive plan amendment work program, plan amendment study. So one of the things that we really kind of understood with this is that in the past, we've had task forces for every type of SSPA. That's unique to SSPA. There's other types of planning studies that don't always require a task force. And so as a part of our retrospectives changes, some of the changes that we updated as a part of the past year's study has been to make this area more adaptable to the specific site and specific circumstances of the amendment. So if you have kind of a smaller site, limited scope, limited potential impact, there need not be a task force that's going to be reviewing, something that's relatively minor and could proceed through established means. If there's a land use committee in that specific district, if there's neighbors that could be informed and we could go and talk to them about their goes into the planning study, that might be an appropriate mechanism for smaller sites. Kind of in contrast, there may be sites that are large, have complex considerations, maybe cumulative considerations. If you have multiple nominations that are all coming in at the same time, those will still probably require a task force. So the big change at this phase is more flexibility in terms of how community engagement will proceed, but it will continue to include the community. So the form will be better suited to the exact needs of the amendment. Here's the overall
Next
timeline.
slide.
Oh yeah, next slide. Here's the overall timeline all put together. So September, we're doing our outreach to the community, letting people know about this opportunity to submit. Anybody can submit. The real thing is just making sure that you have that property owner signature on the nomination form. However, the board on the December 6th action item still has the ability to accept any nominations that they see fit. So that property owner signature, while it is required, the board has the ability to waive that requirement. So I just want to make sure that that's clear, because we get that question a lot, which is, in prior cycles, we didn't require a property owner signature. What's going on with that? So the board still has the ability to accept nominations regardless. So we'll have the nomination period October. The board will accept and reject nominations into the process December 6th. And the rejection, by the way, is, as we understand it from everything we've heard, going to be the exception rather than the rule. I think the rule, or the standard operating procedure will be to accept nominations into the SSPA, screen them in, and let the community meetings and the community engagement proceed. So we'll have the screening phase community meetings in January, the Planning Commission workshop, which will produce a recommendation to the board in February, and then either in February or early March, we'll be looking at that action item to determine which of these should be, formalized as planning studies. Again, that's not the end of the planning process. This is just through February, March. This is the result of this will be the addition of some plan amendments to the comp plan work program, after which we continue to work with the community on whether or not a comp plan amendment should or should not be. So I've got
Next slide.
next slide. I have some additional information about the nominating process and like the exact details of what we'll be looking for and everything like that. But before I go any further, I know I've thrown a lot of process questions at everybody. So if any of you have any questions, be happy to answer those on anything that I've gone over so far.
I got a question, Jeff.
Go ahead, John.
Sure, go ahead.
Say any landowner can submit an application to change the comprehensive plan. Is there a weighted decision matrix? For example, say the Sully District Land Use Committee representing 50 HOAs submits a request. Would that cover more weight with the planning staff than just some developer wanting to make more money off his vacant lot?
I think we'd have to see the exact details. I don't think that the exact stakeholder will factor in as much as the relevance of the nomination compared to countywide policy. So don't mean to be, to dodge the question, so to speak, but it is something where it's a case by case basis in terms of getting a sense of, what's being nominated, what's the area? Is it a logical planning area? Is it something where, we have strong support from a countywide policy perspective in looking at a change? But that I will reiterate that stakeholders that are not necessarily, kind of your run-of-the-mill developers or land use attorneys can participate. And so that's why we wanted to make sure that people understand the exact form, how to put something in, the requirements in terms of the submittal items, that sort of thing. So we'll definitely take a look at it, and we're hoping for more of that. We didn't have that many that were kind of coming in from land use interested groups, citizen groups in prior cycles. It was kind of one of the criticisms of the prior cycles. So we are hoping that our outreach and the modifications that we've made to the process can enable that. So I hope that answers your questions.
Yeah, I got a follow-up.
Sure.
Jim and I participated when they did it the APR way, 10 years ago.
Yes.
Would you be willing, say you get a list of a dozen fairly reasonable proposals, would you be willing to come out to the land use committee and go over those with us?
Sure. Of course.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good.
I think the question would be, at which point would we be going out? One thing that, as you might expect, this being kind of a countywide cycle, is that we've gotten a lot of pre-submittal inquiries. And at this point, we are stuffed to the gills, I guess you could say, and having to kind of scale back on, talking to people about the specifics of their nominations before they submit them. But we'd be happy to do that following the nomination period. And if you need help putting something in, kind of like going through the physics of the form, we'd be happy to work with you on that. I would just say that the policy considerations, we kind of have to save that for once the nomination comes in. But we'd be happy to work with you to help.
Okay, I'm looking at
Get the form
Saving
together.
you time, say you get a dozen for the Sully District, we can get the word out, you're gonna come explain these proposals, we'll fill up the room, and you won't just get a citizen with a potential financial conflict of interest, but you'll get all the representatives from the local HOAs that would have concern over a particular proposal. And for you to sit there and explain it to everybody, field the questions, I think it'd be very constructive overall.
Sure. We'd be happy to answer process questions. Absolutely. So no problem there.
Great, thank you.
Sure.
Any questions, Jim? Anybody here in the vehicle? Luke?
Yes, sir.
Two somewhat related questions. One, would it be possible for an individual say, well, I have a proposal for a change to the county transportation plan. Either remove something that's in there right now or add something new as a missing link.
As good as an idea as that may be, the answer is unfortunately no.
Well,
as a part of SSPA. Yeah.
For a moment. I don't know how you can say no, because a transportation asset, a physical element on the ground, is a use of that land. Tell me how a use of that land, for transportation purpose, is not an eligible activity.
Sure. I'll show you exactly what I'm talking about here, and maybe this will help in terms of your question and the eligibility. But what we have, I'll just kind of jump ahead.
Next slide.
Yeah, next slide. I'll go through the form so you can see how the whole thing should be put together. I'll show you the eligibility map. I could just tell you right now, all of the Sully District is eligible. So in terms of land areas and what we're dealing with SSPA, which is changes in terms of density, intensity, or land use mix, that's kind of our realm in terms of SSPA. So I just want to make sure it's clear. That's the unit of change that we're looking at in most instances is going to be that mix, the mix of uses. So going from residential to mixed use, going from office to residential, different types of changes in terms of what the comp plan has for a specific site or a collection of sites, and then density and intensity. So if something's planned for 3 to 4 units to the acre, and somebody has an idea for going to 5 to 8, something from single family residential to townhouse level density. That's the kind of thing that SSPA is there for. Additional changes you might see in terms of office. So right now it might be conceptually difficult to imagine, at least for me. But if somebody had a 0.25 FAR, so a floor area ratio of 0.25 for office density or intensity, excuse me, and they wanted to bump it up to a 1.0 mixed use office residential, that's kind of the unit of change that we'd be looking at with SSPA. So to your question, eligibility, I'll show you the map because we have an area map of the entire county showing which areas are eligible. Mike can correct me if I'm wrong. I think all of the Sully District is eligible since we don't have a current SSPA going on right now. So I'll just skip that since it's, in terms of relevancy, it's all of Sully is eligible. Got some basic contact information from the nominators. So If the nominator is a representative from a group, so an HOA or a land use group, there should only be just one point of contact, but they can be a representative of a group. That's not a problem. The basic information, we want to know the name, who they represent, if they do represent a group, basic contact information, address, email address, phone number. We also want to know the names of the property owners and their contact information. Then we get into the property information. So we want to have the tax map parcels, the street addresses, the supervisory district in which the site is located. If you have one that's on kind of the border, so if it's half in the Sully District and half in Drainsville, for example, that's okay. That's fine. You just need to indicate that it's in 2 districts. If it's a neighborhood consolidation proposal, there's additional requirements. I won't get into that for the sake of what we're doing today, but certain types of nominations can be considered neighborhood consolidations, especially those that deal with existing residential uses that are single family townhouses, that sort of thing. Property owner consent, as I mentioned, is a requirement unless it's waived by the board. We do ask for property maps. I'll show at the end, I guess, of this presentation how to put in a property map. We have a great tool called JADE, Fairfax County JADE. And so that is a GIS system that anybody can use. And I'll show you how to go about creating a property map. Existing and proposed change. So this is kind of the meat and potatoes of what we're dealing with, which is, what does the comp plan say today about my site? Is it planned for single family home density? So, 3 to 4 units to the acre, single family homes are recommended. Maybe that's what the current comp plan says for my sector. And then what is the proposed change? So what's the thing that I'm interested in doing? So that's the nomination. So ask for a comparison of current and proposed. And then what we'll use, and the Planning Commission will use, in looking at the nominations as they come in, is what we call the statement of justification. So this is what is used to describe how a nomination is supposed to look on a site and how it would go about changing the comprehensive plan. So typically these are 1 to 2 pages, and they can be more. It's fine if there's additional information. What we would ask is that the statements, when they're kind of describing what's intended with the nomination, try to describe how they would also achieve these, which are our justification criteria. So we use these are important. We use these to evaluate which of the nominations should be advanced for further review and for not, and not. So we would ask that the statements explain how they address a community concern or changing circumstances, how they advance the objectives in the county's current comprehensive plan, the area plans, the policy plan, that's the countywide policies, how they would align with the goals of the county's strategic plan, the community-wide housing strategic plan, the One Fairfax policy, economic success plan, other board adopted policies that are beyond the comp plan, but are related, may have references within those to related policies. Additionally, we would ask that the statements include a summary of the prospects for implementation. So if there's a change that's being proposed and a development application is going to be intended once the nomination is advanced for further review, if it is advanced for further review, we want to know that. We want to understand, which of these has the best prospects for implementation. We also ask that nominators explain if they've done any outreach to the community in the past. It's not a requirement that they have, but if they have, tell us who they've reached out to in the past, who they see as being key stakeholders in their review of the nominations. Illustrative concept. Realizing we need to change the spacing on bullets. That. The concepts can be illustrative in nature. They don't need to be professionally engineered drawings, but we do ask that they give us enough information to be able to really kind of visually understand what's being proposed in the statement of justification. So ask for property lines, dimensions, streets, parking areas, how site access works, on-site and off-site structures and their uses, any natural or environmentally sensitive areas, and then the arrangement of other elements on the site, such as open space, parks, recreation areas, that sort of thing. So I thought I had a slide in here about we know what it was. It was in the eligibility, wasn't it? Yeah. So to your question, the eligible areas include, and this is explicit in the board matter, but they include areas or exclude areas, that are subject to a current land use change. So if there's something on the comp plan work program where we're already looking at a land use change, already doing a planning study, those areas are kind of out of bounds. So the area that you see right here in red, for example, this is the government center property. So that's undergoing a current visioning work. There's a land unit change that's being considered there, looking at an affordable housing development, for example. So that area is excluded from SSPA since there's a current land use planning change under consideration. The other is making sure that we aren't looking at things too frequently. And so what we've had previously is called a 4-year timeout period. We've actually reduced that down to a 2-year period. So basically an area is off limits if the board has taken action on a comp plan change within the past 2 years. So if there's been an amendment on the site since October 28th of 2020, then that area is also off limits. But anything past that date is eligible for SSPA. And then one thing that's been carried forward as a part of the current incarnation of SSPA has been an exclusion of proposals that are not specific to land use. So that includes changes, direct changes to countywide systems such as the transportation plan map, parks. So proposals to change change land areas over to parks, for example, those are excluded as well. So I think the difference is, could there be an influence of a nomination on the transportation planning map? Yes, and in a lot of cases there is. I think the distinction between what you're suggesting is that it can't be a nomination to explicitly do that. It would need to be related to a land use change that's looking at change in intensity or density.
Right, but following up on your earlier statement, if you had a land use change that identify or suggest certain transportation system adjustments to reflect that land use change?
So I would say that in terms of our criteria, that it's very clear that changes to, the transportation plan map, and it's not just for roads, but also for the trails plan, for example. Those are excluded from SSPA. It might be a good idea to do that. It has nothing to say about, the quality of the idea. It's just that SSPA isn't the process for it. It'd be through a board matter with, the supervisor.
I don't agree with your logic, but I'll set that aside.
Okay.
Another question I had was, you laid out your process, what's going to be done.
Yes, sir.
So here are the actions in nomination phase, review phase, such. Are those procedures which you described actually formally, legally mandated? Or could, for example, a supervisor say, well, yeah, it says we should have community meetings, but I don't want to do that.
I mean, sure. So in terms of the legality, we are operating within, we check with our county attorney on this. We're operating within our statutory requirement in terms of the review of the comp plan every 5 years. Code of Virginia allows us to do this and related projects that we've had in the past, Fairfax Forward, APR. So in terms of what the state requires, we're well within that. This is far above and beyond what other jurisdictions do. In terms of the process, the board has adopted the process. So this is something that they've said, this is the way that we want it to proceed. And so it would take another action, from the board to say, we want to do something different. So this is the process that we're working under. I haven't heard anything contrary to anybody saying, I don't want to do community meetings for screening or anything like that. We did it, community meetings. I think we had task force meetings for both the North County and the South County cycle in 2017 and 2019, respectively. It worked. And I think we're still wrapping up the South County, but it's something that community engagement as a part of SSPA that's the bread and butter. That's what makes it unique compared to other planning studies and other jurisdictions, that are comparable to ours. So.
Any questions? Go ahead, Steve.
Does this in any way relate to the Alcohol Mountain? Is the downzone area excluded from this, or is it? No?
It's not excluded, no, sir. So if somebody wanted to put in a nomination, they're eligible to do so. That doesn't mean that county staff would support it, but it is, anybody can put in an area. Let me show you I can show you the eligibility map if I can see it. Why is it doing that?
You did mention that the entirety of Sully District is basically eligible,
Yes.
which would, by definition, include Occoquan and zoning.
That's correct. So Occoquan, kind of the downzoned area, it is eligible. So all of Sully District is eligible. This is not coming out very well in terms of the resolution. If y'all want to look at it on the map, I can also send you a link, Jeff, afterwards. But
Thank you.
the area that's eligible, so y'all know the Sully District boundary. And I don't think that there's an area within Sully District currently that is subject to a pending land use plan amendment or has been adopted within the past 2 years. And so those are the only two rules in terms of which land areas are eligible or not. So the downzone area, the area, along the Occoquan, is eligible for SSPA. It does that, but that is a separate, that's just an objective thing. It's not a statement of whether staff, the board, PC would support a change.
Any other questions or such? So will you be calling? Well, one of the things I noticed with the district plan reviews is that some parcels were very close to the district lines.
Yes.
And although they might be in Springfield, the people who live across the street lived in Sully, and they'd have a higher impact than other Springfield people because there might not be another residential development in Springfield.
Right.
But the Sully people were not invited to the Springfield district planning process because they weren't in Springfield. And we in Sully used to go back when it was first formed in 1990, back up to almost the Fairfax city line, almost down to Braddock Road. As those got developed, they were cut loose and sent Francie free to Braddock and Springfield and Providence and other places. So we still have an embedded interest in those units. My recommendation is to consider the communities of interest without regard to the creating strict lines by magistrating district.
I would like to think that we've gotten better about that. It's not perfect. I remember hearing as a part of the North County cycle that Sully District was involved in 2017. I remember hearing some consternation or concern, I guess you could say, about that exact issue. When, especially, I think the one I'm thinking about was the Inova proposal. If you remember that ICPH at the in Maryfield off of Gallows Road. There were some in the Mason District who were right across the line and weren't a part of the task force that was set up. For example, it was a Providence District based nomination, fully within the Providence District. So that was something that we heard that previously. I will say that because we're not doing task forces for screening, we on the staff end of things have a bit more flexibility in terms of being able to actually just notify as we think is appropriate, and that can and does transcend across supervisory districts. So I think we've gotten a lot better about our notification, not just in terms of property owners, but also in terms of renters, trying to pick up more people and trying to get people that are just living around the sites, working around the sites. And when we're drawing these maps, we don't use that layer as a factor. So.
When you talked about land use groups reviewing it, there are some cases, some districts that do not have those items. For example, the Hunter Mill has a land use group that's appointed and run by the supervisor's office.
Yep.
There are other districts where like we are not appointed by the supervisor, but are an independent group. And you might have some districts, we have both, an independent and a board appointed. And so we need to be careful. The other one is, for example, just north of Sully is Drainsville. Drainsville doesn't have a land use committee that I know of citizens.
Correct. Yep.
It's got the McLean Citizens Association on the 4 East. It's got the Great Falls Grange to the west of McLean.
Mm-hmm.
You've got this town of Herndon, and then you have the area in Drainsville that's it's not in Herndon, directly north of us. It's not in Great Falls, it's not in McLean. Who would be the appropriate people to review those parcels? I know we stuck our foot in Drainsville and said, you're across our border. And that was the ones at the corner of Fox Mill and Sunrise.
Mhm.
And we said, these are on our boundaries and our borders, and we think that we have as much right to comment on them as anybody else. And John Faust said, we took care of it. And yet I don't know of a citizens group that was empowered to review that. There might have been, but it seems to me that we should have been invited as next door neighbors. I know that we have in our mailing that we go out to, we send copies of our agenda to Hampton Mill folks and to the Springfield, because they're across the line.
Right.
And what they do might interest us and vice versa. So I just want you to be aware that we want to make certain that the arbitrariness and the changeability, because those lines are mutable.
Right.
Every 10 years they change, and what we thought was ours is no longer ours. And yet we approved the original plan, and now somebody else is approving it, and they don't have necessarily the history behind why what was approved was approved.
Yep. Yep.
Sometimes, for example, pre-pandemic, maybe 19 or 18, they did the I-66, the Fairfax Center area re-review.
Okay.
I might have been the only person on that task force to have served in the original in 83. And everybody else is going, well, this is what we should do. And I go, you ought to know what was done and why it was done this way, because it makes a difference
In terms
in
of-
how you go forward.
Absolutely, yeah. I will, it's a good point. It's a really important point. And I think that what we've done in terms of the evaluation stage, if I flip back over to it, gives the opportunity for that type of cross jurisdiction line type of collaboration. I'll just say this with screening, because with the screening is not going to use a task force model. It's going to be community meetings where we go and notify and do specific, advertising based on where the nominations come in, with the hope that we're getting, as a part of that screening phase discussion, more input from those that are potentially the most impacted. That's kind of the model that we're using for screening. Anybody can participate in the community meetings. That's just kind of the purpose that we're moving towards, is trying to make sure that we get that more acute feedback, I guess you could say. Once something's been added to the evaluation phase, though, task forces aren't even necessarily the go-to model anymore. It may be for really complex, really large scale changes, but if we're dealing with a single site and it's a relatively straightforward or relatively low impact type of change, it might be community meetings, or it might be an established group, whether it's a formal ad hoc advisory committee or something else.
Well, look at your map that you have there.
Yes.
The area in red, I don't know what that red stands for. What's that?
Red? Are you talking about this one right
The
here?
Pender, the Fairfax Center area.
Yes.
Okay, but I'm saying is if you look at that area, you'll see Providence, Braddock, Springfield, and Sully all hop skipping around, right?
Oh, yeah.
And a parcel that's going in the middle there has impact on its neighbors. And to have one group look at it and not the other, or invite the others, would do a due service, because the people across the street are impacted.
Can I add something real quick?
Yeah, go ahead.
Part of our outreach will also have to include talking to people, find out who needs to be involved. And the challenge with that is, if we're operating in one group, if they let us know of another group that's neighboring that needs to be pulled in. What we are counting on, and part of the reason we're here today, is to ensure that this group is plugged in so that you know what's happening, where it's happening. I think Graham will share some of that information. So we will learn, as a part of talking to you all, who needs to be involved and when in the process. So there's some thinking that we can do in the office over in the government center, but there's also just having some questions that we ask and we learn from engaging with folks.
Well, as you expand your table of HOAs and civic groups, we know that we in Sully would like to get that revised list as well. Because sometimes we send emails out to people who no longer live in the Northern Virginia area, or no longer an officer of their organization, or died. And we go, well, I want to contact this HOA, and one of those three or all four of them have happened, and we have no idea how to contact that HOA because
And
The email bounces,
we
yeah.
don't get that list too. We run into the exact same problem, which is why it's important that we come out to groups like this and have the conversation. OPA, the Office of Public Administration, keeps a list, and then I guess it's up to the supervisor's district. Each district also could keep a list of active HOAs, and they change all the time. So the only way that I found success is asking people, who do we need to contact? Who are the HOAs? Who are their contact person? And that's the only way that I know it works. So if you all can stay plugged in, and I think Graham will show you exactly how to do that, we'll be good to go.
we try to keep the pulse on next to the woods. Okay, anything else that you have for us tonight?
That was it. I was gonna do, if y'all are interested in kind of like the nitty gritty details of how to look up a property on our comp planning, GIS portal,
Mhm.
I can show that to you because
Okay,
it's an
why
easy
don't
way of
you-
showing how to do it. Yeah.
If I can do that, I'm gonna open up. People won't see it there. Or maybe you do it, then I will I will open up and share my desk and see if I can do it as well.
Okay.
So tell us how to do it. I
Absolutely.
will try to do it as well.
So
Maybe I'll share my screen.
I will show you. So go to slide. You go to slide 16. So for those of y'all that are following along, slide 16 is the link. So I'm going to show you, based on the Sully District Government Center building, how to look up comp plan information.
Okay, Jim, can you see my screen now?
I can't either.
I see, oh, I have to press yes. And say go do it, shit. Let's try that now. Okay, tell me if you're seeing my screen. What page am I on now?
16.
All right, I have to get up to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Wonderful.
All we see is a giant screen, Jeff.
Okay, what happened here is I've been pressing the plus, which is, doesn't move your page, it just increases the size of the thing. So, all right, now it's 8, 9, 10, no, wrong page.
We're not seeing anything.
Hold on.
You might not be sharing your screen.
Okay, here's this, let's go back to this. Sharing. Share. I want to share here, and I say share. Okay, now do you see that Fairfax County Jade?
If you click the X in the upper corner, then we might be able to.
Click X in the upper corner.
No. Where it says rearrange videos in the stage.
Okay, let's do that. Go back to here. Click.
If you get rid of that pop-up, then we can see it.
Okay, speaking John Litzenberger, so you be quiet for a minute. Let's
I'm
see.
seeing faces, and there's a hand shifting them around.
All right, say something.
Can you hear me,
This
Jim?
old lady with glasses, there's a bald guy, and I don't know, some other people.
Basically, I want to share my screen.
So
You should be sharing it.
I should be sharing it. I thought I said, it
Okay.
says you're sharing Foxfire.
That screen, Jim, you can get rid of it yourself. I just got rid of it by clicking
well, I
the.
guess I can exit out, but it doesn't. Jeff was asking, and it didn't seem like it was pertinent.
Do you see the map?
Yes.
Okay, good enough. So I'm going to follow your instructions.
All right. So click on that, the word Fairfax County Jade.
Okay,
And so from there, it should pull up another tab
okay,
in
hold on.
Firefox.
This is what you've been showing us before, Jim, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so I have Jade. I have a jaded view, okay?
I'm gonna tell her GIS works then.
I can't see why that's not what everybody says. I have a jaded view. Okay, here we go.
Excellent. So once you're in Jade,
Okay.
I think of it as just kind of the one-stop shop for any kind of planning and zoning information that you want. So for the purposes of just demonstration, go to search,
Okay.
Of a property. So
Now,
it's
which
just
one to search?
So right now, you'll see a couple towards the top of the page. One's called basic tools, a couple of ribbons. One's called reports, one's called searches.
Yes.
To click on searches. And that will give you a couple of different options for looking up a parcel. So the first one's parcel ID. Let's skip that one for now. It's kind of complicated, but the address function, that's what we should look up. So look up the house with the magnifying glass.
Okay, learn about Jade. I've clicked on searches and I don't see, where is
It's this one right there, that guy.
this, not the word searches.
No, yeah, you're in there. You're in searches.
Okay, now click on this.
Click on that one.
Okay, search for an address.
Right.
Okay, now,
And so from there, type in the number of the street. So I think we're at 4,700 Stonecroft. And your street type abbreviation, which is Boulevard. Search.
I'm being biased. I'm doing my house. Same idea. Okay, gotcha.
I'm not at the government center, but this is Westfield High School then. So that'll give you a parcel. So if you wanted to look up Westfield High School, for example, this will tell you the address. If you're interested in finding out more information on that in terms of the planning recommendations, just left click. And what that'll do is it'll pull up a couple of options. So if you wanted to look up general parcel information, you click on the little pop-up that says general parcel reports.
Okay.
And so this will give you a lot of good information. I wish this was a better resolution. But it'll give you information about owners. In this case, obviously, the school board owns the property. It'll give you information regarding the zoning. So it's split zone I3 and RC, residential conservation. It had overlays, airport noise, water supply protection districts. And then it'll give you the comp plan. So if you wanted to find out what the comprehensive plan has to say about that specific site, in this case, it has a collection of uses that are recommended: industrial, mixed use, private open space, public facilities, and public parks. So, I've never actually seen one that has that many baseline recommendations. So this is the audit here. And then it'll tell you.
It's typical of what happens.
So it's a huge parcel. Looking at this thing, it's got the Cub Run, Rec Center. So, and then from there, it'll give you information about where to look up more detailed information. So those descriptions that I have for you here, industrial, mixed use, private open space, those are just the base plan recommendations. There may be more detailed guidance in the comp plan itself that tells you more information about that specific parcel. So how you would look that up is by going into plan area number 3. So the comp plan area recommendations are in 3 volumes. Most of the Sully District, kind of the western part of the county, is located in plan area number 3. And then in the Bull Run planning districts and the Upper Cub Run plan sector. So you can actually click on these, maybe able to navigate in the comprehensive plan to the plan sector. That pulls up. Go to area 3, which is the area in green, you see here. But the Wi-Fi is working. It's a little slow here. Here, hold on. Hold on. Districts. Then you have Upper Cub Run, community planning center. And so just as it's listed out right here in the general parcel reports, area 3, Bull Run, Upper Cub Run, planning sector, you can navigate in the comp plan to that specific sector text. And this is where your site is going to have its specific plan recommendation. So kind of that longer form of potentially paragraphs or bullets that explain in greater detail what's planned for that specific area. So this is where if y'all are familiar with APR or BOLD, you have subunits, in some cases land units. This is where that information is contained, is in the sector base. So that's how you look up your comp plan information, and then you can use that as a comparison against, what's the proposed change. So the nominated change can be used in comparison to the current comp plan. And then if you wanted to make a map of your parcel, you can do that. So Jeff, I'm back onto Jade. And so what you can do is you say, I want to, it's that blue button you see here.
Mhm.
And then you say, I want to create, go down to, I want to create a printable map. Not for demonstration purposes. There's a huge plan. So create a printable map.
Can you increase the space or you just decrease the scope of the map?
Just got to decrease the scope of the map, so you got to zoom out a little bit. So when you do that, you can do a couple of things. You can just hit as nomination, for example, if you wanted to title your map print. And that will create just a quick map that explains this is the nominated parcel. And click open file. Map. So the name that you assigned to it. If you want to outline the property map, which is the requirement for the nomination, you can do that. I'll show you how to do that in just 1 second. So click back to Jade. You go, instead of doing the search, go to measurement tools, which is right next to it in the ribbon. And then from there, you can click on the boundaries of the site. So that brings up a drawing tool, allows you to start creating a polygon. So this is probably a bad example since it's such a big site, but go through it, come up with an area. Say it's that area, and that's the area that you want to nominate. Once again, generate that marker, and that'll tell you exactly the area that you want to print. So whatever you click will be the area that is.
So this Jade is how many initiations or iterations of the original? Was this the one, is this changed since you've looked at it?
Pretty much the same.
What are you comparing it to?
Jim, about 3 years ago?
Yeah, I started using it before COVID. I used it for meetings.
Okay. Yeah. It's more or less the same thing. They've had probably a couple of scheduled
Yeah, they
updates to it. They're constantly adding
Yeah,
layers
it's
to it.
marvelous.
Yeah, it's really good. It works pretty well. I use it. We have internal GIS ourselves. I've been here about 3 years. I just use this. It was launched around the same time.
Yeah.
So, yeah, so I like it.
Because it's pretty easy user base. You can make quick maps.
Exactly. Yeah.
Good, thank you.
I do it all the time with the council. I send them out an email, like when properties come up, I will do a quick map for them and send it. So, I do McDonald's site.
I will tell you that decades ago, when I was going to grad school, and this must have been 90s, we had a presentation by the county staff on GIS.
Mhm.
And it was in what was called the PPZ or the PowerPoint exploding. I wonder if you remember the self-contained presentations?
No.
All right, just shows you how old that was. But in any case, I exploded it and captured the slides, modified it, and gave a report on that to my system engineering class. I had the best graphics possible because all I had to do was change the overhead page that described presentation to Sully District Council. No, presentation to my class. Very nice.
Perfect. Yeah.
I still remember that. Never mind. But in any case, are there any questions before we let him go for the evening? Ken? Lewis? Steve? Okay, we thank you for that.
Thank you all.
Appreciate you coming.
Problem.
Keep us informed when you get items from Sully, and we will think about whether we wish to nominate things for items from Sully. Now, could we, as the Sully District Council, nominate it? We might not get the signature of the landowner.
Correct. If you don't, there's nothing in the form that would prevent you from still putting it in. I would just say that the December 6th action item, which is when the board would accept or reject the nominations for just that, determining whether or whatnot they want them to advance to screening. That would be one where staff, we won't have had time to do any sort of like formal policy analysis of any sort at all. But we'll tell the board, these are, eligible. These have met the submission requirements. These ones have not obtained the property owner's signature, for example. So it would still advance to the board in an action item regardless. So you can still submit it. It's just up to the board to determine whether or not they want to waive that requirement.
So this doesn't go to the planning commission first, it goes to them after the board looks at it, then back down to the planning commission.
Correct. That's a new step, is that it goes board for acceptance and then into the planning commission and then to the board again. So, yeah. If you are interested in nominating, we have a guide, which we're publishing tomorrow. God willing, and the creek don't rise. A guide that goes over all of this in a lot of detail, even more detail than we've put into the
So
presentation.
if you would send us a link to that one that's available, so we can spread it amongst our folks.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, and if you have any questions, want me to come and do, this presentation or a related one, we're happy to do it. So just let me know.
I thank you for that.
Thank you very much. It's good.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Really appreciate it. Thank you, Graham. Thank you for coming. And we appreciate that. I'm going to give you back your little camera because I'd hate you to walk
Oh,
away.
yeah.
With a little camera. I didn't, oh, look at this. This isn't mine. Yeah.
Mike knows, I've actually already.
This is the microphone too.
That is mine. That is probably more expensive.
That's your own?
Yes, sir. Well, no, that means that.
Okay, well, I just want to check sometimes. All right, so with that in mind, I want to go over the folks here online, what their other items are on the agenda. We talked about the public hearing on a proposal on to prohibit through truck traffic on Bull Run Postover Road. The board approved that action. And I saw some form letters that were sent to people. And it's now up to Loudon to approve it. They're thinking that it's going to be, the Loudon is going to work to support, their county staff is working to get Loudon's buy-on on this. You all know that the board is sending a letter to the Commonwealth Transportation Board asking that Route 50 and Route 29 be named Route 50 and Route 29. But I'm looking forward to them changing the signs on the highways to say Route 50, formerly known as so-and-so. How long does the formerly have to be there so the people who have the old instructions don't get lost? So what I'm thinking is that
I thought the governor had plans to refund tax money to.
well, this is the counties. But what I think is funny is that they have to put the words, Lee Jackson Memorial Highway is not a small name of a highway. And now to add on top of it, formerly known as, just takes up more space. But all right, never mind. On the Monday, the 17th of October, next month, we're going to have an affordable housing preservation presentation followed by the Costco gas station. Now, they're trying in Costco to do it not only here in Chantilly, but the one in Fairfax, the one off of West Ox. They figure the one here in Chantilly is an easy peasy. The one in Fairfax is much harder. Okay? Yes, it is. But they're going to make that presentation to us. In addition, I encourage you to join us on the 28th of September when we have a tour of the Sully Community Center. Now, the Sully Community Center is not run by the Sully office. It's run by the Neighborhood and Community Organization, Neighborhood and Community Services, right? And they run it, they schedule it. And the grand opening was this Saturday. And we're going to have a tour, 7 o'clock on Wednesday, the 28th. We will not be able to live stream that meeting. And I encourage people to attend and just attend there if they wish. All right? Well, I mean, they do, but I'd have to walk around with a camera walking around. All right, so what I'm saying is that I really can't open a WebEx. And I have to walk around my, you know what I'm saying? They also told us that we can't use a meeting room until January. I said, what happens if after the meet, we're gonna meet in the lobby, and after the meeting, we just sit in the lobby and talk? She says, that's easy to do. So after the meeting, after our tour is over, we will camp down in one of the seats and hold an informal meeting there until it's over. Okay? I hope you folks can join us on that meeting. It's a brand new facility, one of the best. You know, they keep on improving it. There are pickleball courts, community rooms, a health services facility. And so, it'd be nice. At the grand opening ceremony, I pointed out that I walked there and I had to cross a road that had no pedestrian markings. I said, you're an attractive nuisance. What do you mean by that? I said, well, people are going to walk this way and you don't have a pedestrian sidewalk, a crossing. So people are going to have to walk up a block or down a block, and knowing pedestrians, they don't do that. That was my comment to them. And they said, well, you know, that's up to somebody else. I said, no, if you're building this, you ought to plan for that. That was my thought. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much. What do you want us to do next month in October? Anything you want me to move out first with? Yeah, I had a list that we talked about, and I will go down that list and pick something out of it. And don't forget the Route 66 hot lanes from 28 west to Gainesville are now open, free. Ride them now. The price will only get dearer. I understand, but if you ever want to drive on this without paying $1 a mile, now's your chance to do it. Can't you get on it here in Route 28 and you take it westbound, or is it only the eastbound lanes? No, I understand. I'm going to do that on a. Yeah. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much. All right, I'm going to let you guys go. Thank you, guys. I think everybody else has left.
Question, you want to check on 4 years ago? Well, you just changed.
I don't know. Things are.
So it occurred to me. Yeah, I was wondering. Oh, man. Somebody, and you have the signs from all the way.
National Park Service. Oh, yeah. Yes,
I know what it was supposed to be. Or stings.
Right, right. Something else.